Welcome to Shori Hub, where you can dive into true stories of wives, betrayals, and surprising turns of events. Hit that subscribe button and let's get started on today's tale. John Miller was a powerhouse, having been an NCAA wrestler and holding a BJJ purple belt. Built like a tank, he showed his strength early on. At 9, he managed to fend off a 13-year-old bully. His parents took him to numerous therapists and psychiatrists before discovering his secret. An imbalance of certain hormones granted him bursts of hysterical strength. His body produced a lot of adrenaline, making him almost superhuman for short spans. To manage this, he was given medication to control his episodes. His parents and doctors agreed that channeling his energy into physical training and avoiding stressful situations was key. Soon, John was deeply involved in wrestling and BJJ, while his mother introduced him to meditation techniques to help him stay calm. It all seemed to work, and John became known as a calm man, though those close to him called him the Hulk. His coaches would hype him up before matches, knowing that once the Hulk was unleashed, victory was assured. However, no one knew what might happen if he ever truly lost control. John's college years passed without a hitch. He landed a good job, and life took a positive turn when he married Lisa. After wrapping up a successful negotiation in Portland that promised to boost his company's cash flow, John was heading home. He also had the chance to catch up with his younger sister, Sarah, who was studying at the University of Oregon in Eugene. They enjoyed dinner at the Courtyard by Marriott and spent hours reminiscing, as it had been years since their last get-together. John cherished their time together, but was eager to get back to Lisa, his wife of almost 4 years. His job often kept him away from her, which he disliked. He was particularly excited about their upcoming 4-year anniversary in 2 days. He had planned a surprise weekend getaway at a local resort, and had ordered a stunning emerald teardrop necklace for her, which he intended to pick up the next afternoon. But as his flight neared, he wondered where Lisa might be. He had tried calling her cell before boarding, but it went straight to voicemail. The same happened when he called the house. Maybe she's out shopping with friends, he thought, reflecting on how much he missed her. Lisa, standing just under 5.5 feet tall, with long, wavy blonde hair, green eyes, and a sun-tanned complexion, was usually sweet, but her jealousy was a sore point. She often made baseless accusations, despite his efforts to prove his fidelity. Once, in exasperation, he had even suggested she hire a private investigator to watch him. He hoped that once she saw proof of his faithfulness, her fears would be allayed. Her jealousy was wearing him down, especially since he had secrets of his own that her constant suspicion threatened to expose. His heart raced as he dwelled on her jealousy. He took deep breaths, trying to calm down, and finally took a pill to help. A fellow passenger noticed and asked if he was okay. John assured him it was just an old heart condition, and the medication would handle it. The man nodded, though he kept a watchful eye on John. The plane finally landed. John grabbed his luggage and headed to his car in the short-term parking lot. He tried calling Lisa again, only to reach her voicemail. The same happened when he called the house. Where could she be? He wondered. He started the car and drove home. When he pulled into the garage, he saw that Lisa's car was gone. It was unusual for her not to be home by 7 p.m. Maybe she went out with her friends from work for a drink, he thought. It was rare, but he didn't mind as long as she let him know in advance. She knew he was coming home today and usually made sure to be there. Entering the dark house, he put his things away and looked for a note from Lisa, but found none. Making himself a cup of coffee, he pondered the situation. Lisa always informed him if she was going to be out. Why was there no note this time? As he sipped his coffee, his phone rang. Seeing it was Lisa, he quickly answered. Lisa, where are you? I'm sorry, John. I was prepping for tonight and didn't see your call until just now. What were you getting ready for? John asked. It's a surprise. Some friends and I wanted to welcome you back tonight. Come join us and we can celebrate. Sure. Where are you? She gave him an address, and he jotted it down. What is this place? A club or a restaurant? A friend of mine has a private spot at his house. We decided to throw a combined welcome home and anniversary party for you. That sounds interesting, John said. Lisa chuckled. It'll be a blast, I promise. Dress casual, okay? Got it. I'll be there soon. See ya, hun, she said before ending the call. Odd, John thought. She didn't say she loved him, yet this was supposed to be an anniversary surprise. Still, something in her tone made him curious. He went upstairs, took a shower, shaved, and put on blue jeans and a polo shirt. He checked the address on Google Maps, and saw it was in a rather rough part of town. Who does she know out there? He wondered. He knew most of her colleagues from the insurance office and doubted any lived there. So who was this friend? He knew she had some rough acquaintances in her younger days, but thought she had left that behind. He locked up, got in his car, and entered the address into his GPS. Following the directions, he arrived at a medium-sized house in a lot surrounded by a chain-link fence. The pickups and motorcycles parked around made him uneasy, as he didn't recognize any of them. He parked, walked to the front door, and knocked. A large man in a t-shirt and jeans answered, beer in hand, with rap music playing inside. "Yeah?" the man asked. "I'm John Miller, and my wife Lisa said to meet her here. I hope this is the right place." The man grinned, but John wasn't sure if it was friendly. The man extended his hand. "You must be Lisa's husband. I'm Rick. We've been expecting you. Come on in." John entered and saw several other large men in the living room. "Hey everyone, the guest of honor is here," Rick announced. The men nodded and smiled at John, but he felt no real warmth from them. "Where's Lisa?" John asked. "She's downstairs getting ready for the main event," Rick said, making the others chuckle. "Want a beer?" Sure," John replied. One of the men handed him a cold bottle. "Thanks," John said, taking a cautious sip. "So, what's this main event?" he asked Rick. "That's the surprise. Your wife wanted to do something special for your anniversary and asked for our help. I don't know you guys. Who are you?" "Well, that's Matt over there," Rick said, pointing at one man. "That's Dave, and next to him is Steve. The big guy at the back we call Bull. You can see why." John saw a huge, muscular man by the kitchen table. They all looked tough, and John noticed a large knife on Dave's hip. "Yeah, and you're all friends of Lisa?" "Yep," Matt said. "Known her a while. Haven't seen her much since she married you, though." "She never mentioned any of you," John said. "Not surprised. Most folks steer clear of us." "And you have a private club here?" John asked. "Yeah," Rick said. "In the basement. Built it ourselves. We like to hang out, have some drinks, and bring in some entertainment." The others laughed, but John's instincts told him something was wrong. He heard footsteps coming up from the basement. "She's ready," a sixth man said, entering the room. "Is this her husband?" "Yeah," Rick replied. "John, this is Jim. He'll take you down." "What's going to happen?" John asked. "It's a surprise. Promise it'll be unforgettable." The others chuckled, and John felt uneasy. "It's fine. Come on, Lisa is waiting." John followed Jim downstairs. "Happy anniversary," Rick said as John descended. In the basement, John saw a small bar in one corner and a well-lit stage area. A curtain was drawn across it, and a bed sat center stage with a camera on a tripod nearby. Neon beer signs decorated the walls, giving it a dim, bar-like atmosphere. A pool table and a few tables were scattered around, with a jukebox playing music. Two other men stood watching as John entered. Jim led him to a chair in front of the stage, next to a table but facing the stage. "Have a seat," Jim said, pointing to the chair. "Where's Lisa?" John asked. "She'll be out soon. Go on, sit down. You can put your beer on the table if you want." John set the beer down and looked around. Every instinct told him to get out of there, but the 5 men upstairs made that impossible. Plus, he was worried about Lisa. What would they do to her if he ran? He took one last sip and placed his bottle on the table. As soon as he sat, Jim and the other 2 men quickly restrained his arms and zip-tied them to the chair. "What the hell is going on?" John asked angrily. The men ignored him and zip-tied his ankles to the chair's legs. "Let me go right now," John demanded. "Shut up, jerk," he heard his wife say. He looked up to see Lisa wearing nothing but a tiny thong and a half bra. "What is this?" John demanded. "Why are you dressed like that? Who are these guys?" "This is to celebrate our anniversary," she spat. "These guys are my friends, and they're here to help me teach you a lesson about cheating." She threw a photo onto his lap, and he glanced at it. It was a picture of him having dinner with his sister. "I've never cheated on you. This is all wrong," he shouted. Suddenly, John's head snapped back as one of the men punched him in the face. He saw stars and closed his eyes. "Stop it," Lisa commanded, and the man backed off. "Hell be the one who teaches him his lesson." She turned back to John. "Lisa, stop this now and we can talk about it. It's not what it looks like." "Oh, really?" she sneered. "It looks to me like you're having a great time with that blonde floozy. So if you can have fun, so can I. But unlike you, I'm not going to hide it." With that, She turned away and stepped onto the stage. Okay, boys, it's showtime. John tried to protest, but one of the men gagged him, preventing any further outbursts. He struggled, but couldn't break free. By now, all the men had come downstairs. Rick stood next to John and whispered, "Nothing personal, but Lisa's an old friend. So we're helping her teach you a lesson. Just sit back and enjoy the show. Don't try to be a hero. Once she's done, we'll let you go. Whether she goes with you is up to her." John tried to speak, but the gag silenced him. "Just relax, take your medicine, and watch like a man," Rick said. He stepped back and nodded to Matt, who started the jukebox. As the music played, Lisa began to dance like a stripper, twirling around. She kicked off her shoes and slowly removed her remaining clothes. "Do you like this, lover boy?" she mocked John. "Did your little blonde do this for you?" She danced some more, then threw her thong at John. "I hope you enjoy this, lover boy, because you're never touching me again. Come on, boys. Show John how real men treat a woman." She laughed as the men, except for Steve, surrounded her. As John watched, they stripped off their clothes, and Lisa knelt down. John shook his head and tried to scream no through the gag. Steve stood by John's chair, his arms crossed, clearly there to keep John in check. Lisa stood up and led the men to the bed on the stage. She sat on the bed and glared at John. "This will teach you to cheat on me, you jerk," she snarled. She lay down, and two men stood by her head while Rick looked back at John. "Nothing personal, but Lisa is the best I've ever had," he laughed, and turned back to her. "Ready, babe?" "Yeah, Rick. Now take me again and make my husband watch," she laughed. Rick started having sex with her. John, however, was not aroused. Quite the opposite. He tried to use the breathing exercises from his martial arts training, but felt the rage building. Watching Lisa made him sick. She was right about one thing. He would never touch her again. He thought the humiliation was over when Lisa got on her knees, but he was wrong. She looked at him and laughed. "Don't worry, honey," she said sarcastically. "We're just getting started, aren't we, boys?" The men laughed. John looked at Steve, who was smiling. John wondered why he wasn't participating. Steve frowned and grabbed John's head, forcing him to look at the stage. "Watch them, not me," he growled. The rage inside John continued to grow as Lisa carried on. "You want to see how nasty I can be? Just so you know, I'll probably get pregnant tonight," she smirked. "No one used a condom, and I've been off my pills. Don't worry, I used a diaphragm with you, so it won't be yours. But you'll raise this child, and if you refuse, I'll divorce you and ruin you. I'll take everything, make you a pariah, and label you as an abuser and a cuck." John shook his head, his vision blurring with anger. "Wondering why Steve hasn't joined in?" she asked. "Steve prefers men, and after tonight, you will too." They all laughed as John's face turned red hot. He looked at Steve and saw he had unzipped his jeans. "I promise you'll love it," Steve said. Then it happened. John snapped and lost control. The next thing he knew, he was standing amidst a pile of groaning bodies. Steve was screaming, his left hand pinned to the table by a knife. John felt pain in his arms and legs, blood dripping from where the zip ties had been. Looking up, he saw Lisa, wide-eyed and trembling. "Please don't hurt me," she pleaded. "Oh, now you're scared of me? Don't worry, I'm not going to hurt you physically. But I will make sure you feel the pain I went through tonight 100 times over," John said, his voice low and dangerous. Keeping his eyes on her, he pulled his phone from his pocket and dialed 911. When he finished, he put the phone away and glared at her. "You foolish woman," he growled. "I've caught you red-handed. You thought I was cheating on you with that blonde. I was just getting even with you. So you hired a PI to follow me in Portland, huh?" "Yes, and I got that photo," she said, her voice trembling. "Did you even read the report that came with it?" John asked. She shook her head. "No," she admitted nervously. "I just looked at the photo." "That was my sister, you ignorant woman!" John shouted. "The last time we saw her was at our wedding. She's a senior at the University of Oregon in Eugene. She came up to visit me in Portland, and we had dinner. That's all. Just dinner. You saw the picture and didn't even ask me about it. You just assumed, like you always do. Well, guess what? You're right about one thing. I'm never touching you again. I'll see you in jail, and then I'm divorcing you. You've pulled the last straw. We're done." "No, John, please don't do that," she begged, stepping toward him. "Trust me, Lisa, you have no idea what I want to do to you right now. So for your own safety, stay away from me." "John, please," she begged. "I made a mistake, that's all." "Yeah, You made a colossal mistake. I'll teach you what happens when you do that. You played your part, Lisa. Starting today, I will make you pay." By then, the police had arrived, and several officers came downstairs after breaking the front door down. They each had their guns drawn and looked around at the carnage. They quickly moved through the basement, checking each of the men. One officer pulled the knife out of Steve's hand and watched as he slumped to the floor. A sergeant approached John. "Did you do all this?" he asked, shaking. John nodded. "Why?" the sergeant asked. "Look at the video and you'll know why," John said, pointing at the camera. "Check out that video," the sergeant told one of the officers. The officer looked at the video briefly and motioned for the sergeant. After quickly scanning the video, the sergeant came back to John. "Okay, it looks like self-defense on your part, but we'll need a full statement, and you need to get checked out." By then, ambulances had arrived, and paramedics began taking the men upstairs on gurneys. A plainclothes detective arrived and was looking around the room, talking to the officers. After looking through the video, he came over to the sergeant and John. "I am Detective Harris. You must be Mr. Miller." "Yes, that's me." "I've briefly looked at the video. I agree with Sergeant Brown here. It appears you acted out of self-defense. Tell me what happened." John recounted the events of the last few hours. The detective took notes as John spoke. "How did you manage to break out of that chair?" Harris asked. "And how did you take down all these men? They all appear to be much bigger than you." "I have a medical condition. I've had it since I was a kid. There's a name for it, but I can't pronounce it. The bottom line is that under certain conditions, my adrenaline levels spike, and I basically lose it, for lack of a better term. I have a prescription that helps me keep it under control, and my martial arts training also helps. This is only the second time in my life something like this has happened." "Do you have that medication with you?" Harris asked. John nodded. "I keep it with me at all times. I only take it when it's needed, which fortunately isn't very often." Harris asked one of the other officers to bring a bottle of water, which he did. "Maybe you should take one now," Harris said, handing John the water. John pulled the small packet out of his pocket and swallowed a pill with the water Harris had given him. A few seconds later, John felt much better. "Are you okay now?" Harris asked. "Yes, thanks." "Do you remember what you did here?" Harris asked. "No, I don't," John said, shaking his head. Harris showed John the video. He was shocked at what he saw. It was like watching a Hulk movie, only this was real life. He saw himself roar, then break out of the chair. In the video, he grabbed Steve's knife out of its scabbard and plunged it into the bigger man's left hand, pinning it to the table. The other men came after him as Lisa sat terrified. In less than a minute, John had taken all the other men down. "You don't remember doing any of this?" Harris asked. "No, I don't. Honestly, I never thought I even had it in me to do something like this." "What's the last thing you remember?" Harris asked. "That Steve was getting ready to, force himself on me," John said, tears streaming down his face. "So you're saying he was going to force you to perform oral sex?" Harris asked. John nodded. "Yes, he was going to do that, and my wife was in on it." "I see," Harris said, glancing across the room where another officer was taking Lisa's statement. By then, they had covered her with a blanket. "Mr. Miller, I want you to go to the hospital and get checked out. We'll speak more after gathering all the evidence. I assume you'll be pressing charges?" "Absolutely," John said. "And your wife? Do you want to press charges against her as well?" "Especially her. She's the mastermind behind all this." "Understood," Harris said. He took John's contact information while a paramedic checked his wrists and ankles. "I'll be in touch, Mr. Miller. Please don't leave town." "I'm not going anywhere," John replied. Detective Harris nodded and gave instructions to the officers. He then approached Lisa, who was still being questioned. A couple of minutes later, John heard her wail as she was cuffed and led out of the room. "Please, John," she cried. "Don't let them take me away. Please tell them it's a misunderstanding." John shook his head and looked away. After the questioning, John drove to the hospital to get checked out. A few hours later, he drove home with his cuts dressed, cleaned, and bandaged. On the way, he realized he hadn't eaten since leaving Portland and stopped at a drive-thru for a burger. Once home, he ate, then called his boss, Jim Collins, to explain the situation. "Damn, John. I'm sorry to hear that. Look, why don't you bring the signed contract and then take the next week off? You've got plenty of vacation time." Thanks, Jim. I appreciate that, John said. After calming down, John showered and went to bed. The next day, he went to the jewelry shop and canceled the order for Lisa's necklace. He ended up paying a small restocking fee but got most of his money back. He also canceled the hotel reservation and had the charges reversed. He then called around and set an appointment with Jenny Hawkins, an attorney, about a divorce. On Friday, he had just finished lunch when his phone rang. He saw it was Lisa's parents. He took a deep breath and answered. Hello? John, what on earth is going on? Asked Marge, his mother-in-law. Lisa called from the county jail. She said she's been arrested and is being held without bail. Did you do something? John couldn't believe the nerve of this woman. He counted to 10 and took a few deep breaths before answering. Did she tell you why she was arrested? John asked. She said it was all some kind of misunderstanding on your part, Marge said. On my part? Really? You mean she didn't tell you that she plotted to have me tied up, forced me to watch her have sex with multiple men, then planned to have me assaulted by one of her male friends? Didn't she mention that? What? Why would she do such a thing? Because she saw a picture of me having dinner with my little sister and thought I was having an affair. The woman is nuts, and tomorrow I'm seeing an attorney and filing for divorce. You can't be serious. Look, I know you're probably upset, but surely you can understand how she would feel. What would you do if you saw a picture of her having lunch with a man? I would ask her about it. I wouldn't fly off the handle the way she did. Look, Marge, you have no idea what your daughter did, and there's no way in hell I can overlook it. I've been dealing with her insane jealousy since we got married. I'm tired of it. It ends now. As far as the divorce is concerned, let me ask you, Marge, if we reverse the roles and I tie her up and force her to watch me have sex with other women and then have her assaulted by one of them, would you still ask your daughter to remain married to me? Marge had no answer to that. Don't be a hypocrite, Marge. You know very well that what I am doing is absolutely right. With that, he ended the call. When she called back, he sent it straight to voicemail. Curious, he went into the second bedroom where he and Lisa had their home computers. He sat down at her computer and logged in. He knew her passwords, so he got in easily. He opened her email and was shocked at what he saw. He found an email from Jenkins Investigations. Attached was a document and a photo. The photo was of him and his sister having dinner, the same one Lisa had shown him. The report stated that target John Miller, meaning him, had dinner with what appeared to be a much younger woman. It went on to say that after dinner, the woman left the hotel, and John went to his room. There was more. The report clearly stated that the woman was Emily Miller, a senior at the University of Oregon in Eugene, and according to public records, John's youngest sister. At no time was John with a woman for the purposes of illicit sex, and at no time during their observation did John engage in any inappropriate behavior. The report concluded that if Lisa had bothered to read it, she would have known he was innocent. But as usual, she saw the photo and jumped to conclusions. He printed the report and continued digging. He found emails between her and Steve in which she falsely claimed John was cheating and wanted revenge. There were several emails from Steve directing her to a website for revenge. As he read, he felt his blood pressure rise. What happened to him was carefully planned. She intended to have him assaulted, videotaped, and the video published online. He printed the emails and kept digging. He checked her browser history and found visits to similar sites. On the site Steve recommended, he saw sample videos of husbands tied down, forced to watch their wives with other men, and then being humiliated. The final humiliation involved Jerry. He recognized the men in the videos: Rick, Matt, Dave, Steve, Bull, and the others. They were all involved in such websites. What shocked him more was that the videos were available to anyone who paid a premium fee. John knew online spicy videos required a release form giving permission to publish. He was never given that chance and wondered if the other men had. He picked up his phone and called Detective Harris. Harris, the detective answered. Detective, this is John Miller. I have some information you might find interesting, John said. Can you come to my house? Sure, let me finish up here, and I'll be right over. Thanks, John said before ending the call. As he waited for Harris, he performed a search to see if he could identify the site's owner. The registration was private, but he knew a law enforcement agency could subpoena the records. He also found out which company hosted the site and printed that information for Harris. About a half hour later, Harris rang the doorbell. Thanks for coming, Detective, John said, opening the door. You have something for me? Harris asked. Yes, it's in my computer room, John said. Harris followed him upstairs and looked over the printouts John handed him. This corroborates what we found at the house. From what we saw, they've done this to several men. What about release forms? Harris asked. We found release forms signed by the wives. Even your wife signed a release form. We're still going through everything, though. So she knew this was going on the internet? John asked. Looks that way, Harris said. But what about the husbands? John asked. I don't recall seeing anything like that. But like I said, we're still going through all the evidence. Look, I'm going to need to confiscate your wife's computer for evidence. Go ahead. I'd like to keep these printouts for my attorney, though. The files are still there in her email. Harris nodded after considering it. Sure, but don't destroy them. After Harris left with Lisa's computer, John sat at his own machine and had a brainstorm. He began searching some video sites and found several lengthy videos produced by the site. He scanned through them and saw that in each one, the husband was treated much like he was, while the wife took on all the other men except for Steve. Each video ended with Steve engaging in sex with the husbands. John looked back through the email thread he printed from Lisa's computer and read it carefully. There it was in black and white. Just so you know, Steve wrote, we usually end the session with some sex involving the husband. Are you okay with that? Oh, definitely, Lisa wrote back. How far does it go? As far as you want, so long as your husband agrees to it, Steve said. I'd like to see him get screwed, Lisa wrote. Sure, Steve wrote back, but he has to agree. Don't worry about that. I'll make him agree, Lisa wrote. John felt his blood pressure begin to rise and stepped back from the computer, taking deep breaths. Unfortunately, that wasn't working, so he took another pill and went downstairs. He couldn't stand to be exposed to any more of this. The next day he went to see Jenny about a divorce. He made a copy of Lisa's emails and took them with him. One copy would be for Jenny, and the other he would present to Lisa's parents. He arrived at the office a few minutes early and was escorted right in. After the introductions, he explained his situation to Jenny and showed her the email thread between Lisa and Steve. Jenny listened without interruption, making notes as he spoke. She read the email thread and shook her head. You know, I thought I had seen it all. Fortunately for you, this state allows for divorce on the grounds of adultery, cruelty, and abuse. I think this covers all three. You say she was arrested and is being held without bail? Yes, John said. Jenny turned to her computer and nodded a few moments later. I see she was arraigned yesterday and charged with spousal abuse, sexual assault, conspiracy to commit assault, fraud, and illegal imprisonment, among others. Apparently, the judge deemed her dangerous enough to keep in custody. It looks like her accomplices are also being held on similar charges. And you say these men operate a website that posts this trash online for money? Yes, I found a few of their videos, and they're all pretty much the same. Did they explain this to you before they tied you down? Jenny asked. No, John said. Did they have you sign a release form? She asked again. No. They made it sound like a surprise anniversary party. They never mentioned anything about sex or selling videos online. Well, I think we not only have a solid case against your wife, but also against the men who did this to you and the hosting provider, she said. As John watched, Jenny did a few more things on her computer. Do you know if they offered your wife any royalties for the video? She asked. No, I haven't seen anything like that, John said. It looks like that website gets a lot of traffic. I'll bet they make a ton of money off this filth. Okay, here's what I'd like to do. I'll draft the divorce papers asking for 90% of everything. On top of that, we'll ask for the house and everything we can get our hands on. The judge may not agree to all of it, and we might have to negotiate down, but it's a strong starting point. We'll use this email thread and the fact that she's being held without bail as leverage. If they do release her, I'll get a restraining order against her and her accomplices. But I don't think you have much to worry about there. You say Detective Harris has the video they made as evidence, and it never got to the internet? He has the video. As far as I know, it never made it to the internet, but it would have if they had the chance, John said. Oh yes, Jenny replied, nodding. Okay, I'll coordinate with him about that video. We'll serve her with the divorce papers, and if you want, I'll also file a civil claim against the website owners and the hosting provider. Yes, that would be good, John agreed. She looked at him thoughtfully before continuing. Do yourself a favor. Don't visit your wife, Stay as far away from her as possible. Don't even dwell on what she did. Let me and the authorities handle it. From what you've told me, you'd be better off not thinking about her at all. If you want, I can set you up with a therapist to help you process this. Would that be all right? John nodded. Yeah, I've tried everything I know, but it's just not enough. Normally, the breathing exercises and the medication keep me under control, but I've never dealt with anything like this. I understand, Jenny said. She handed him a card. Give her a call right now if you want. Please, John said. Jenny picked up her phone, called, and made an appointment for him. When she finished, she smiled and looked at John. Dr. Sykes can see you this afternoon at 4 p.m. Will that work for you? John looked at his watch and nodded. That'll work. Thanks, John said. Good. Here are some things you need to take care of right away, she added, handing him a sheet of paper with a list of tasks. Most of it involved the bank, so he decided to handle it after his appointment with Jenny. I'll take care of this right away, he said. Terrific. Listen, I know this has been rough on you, so I want you to rest, relax, and let us handle things. You understand? I do, he said. Good. Don't worry, John. This will all work out, and you can move forward with your life. He thanked her and left after leaving a healthy retainer. From there, he went to the bank, paid off and closed out their joint credit cards, withdrew everything but $10, and opened a new account in his name only, applying for a new credit card. Next, he stopped at Lisa's parents' house and explained what had happened, showing them the email chain between Lisa and Steve. They were shocked when he told them everything. This is sick. I can't believe she would do something like this. Are you sure you didn't cheat on her? Marge asked. Marge, I love Lisa with all my heart, and I never even thought about cheating on her. She saw a picture of me having dinner with my baby sister and assumed we were having an affair. She didn't even bother to read the report. If she had, this probably wouldn't have happened. Marge shook her head. I don't know what to tell you, John, she said. I'm truly sorry this happened to you. I am sorry I married her. Just do me a favor and stay in touch, okay? We've always thought of you as the son we never had. I'll do that, Marge. By the way, her car is still at that guy's place. I'll give you her keys if you want to go pick it up. I'll bring her stuff by later today or this weekend sometime. Okay, thanks. He handed her the keys and gave her the address. By then, he had just enough time to get to his appointment with Dr. Sykes. Dr. Sykes, Rhonda to her friends and patients, listened to John's story and said nothing until he was finished. I've heard about your condition, but I've never met anyone diagnosed with it. And you say you've been using martial arts training to help keep it under control? Yes, breathing exercises mostly. That along with medication to help my blood pressure. It usually works pretty quickly, and until recently I've hardly had to use it at all. Are you still taking martial arts training? She asked. Yes, John said. Maybe we should look into some additional meditation exercises. Would you be open to that? I would. Good. We've got a lot of work to do, John, but I think we can help you through this without any more medication. I would prefer that. He left and went back home, where he bagged up Lisa's things, including all their wedding photos and her wedding dress. He looked around and boxed up some trinkets she had collected over the years. They meant nothing to him now, and he wanted nothing in the house that would remind him of her. That weekend he changed the locks on the house, took Lisa's things to her parents, and did his usual weekend yard work. On Sunday, he found an app that claimed to help with calming and downloaded it to his phone. He listened to the sound of rain as he went through a regimen of breathing exercises. After a half hour of that, he felt like his old self and decided to go into work the next day. Things were quiet for John over the next few weeks. He went to work, came home, watched television, relaxed, and went to bed. The place seemed much quieter without Lisa, and he enjoyed being able to do what he wanted without her constant accusations. The therapy sessions with Rhonda helped a lot, and he found the relaxation techniques she suggested to be very effective. He stayed in touch with Jenny, who decided to wait until after Lisa's trial to have her served with the divorce papers. Her reasoning was that the divorce would go smoother if Lisa was a convicted felon. The day of Lisa's trial arrived, and John was asked to testify, which he was more than happy to do. The jury was shocked when the DA presented the evidence, including John's testimony. They were so appalled that they returned guilty verdicts on all charges in just a couple of hours. The judge had no sympathy for her either, sentencing her to the maximum under state law, 20 years. She would be eligible for parole in 15 years. As she was being let out, a process server stepped forward, verified her identity, and handed her a manila envelope. "You've been served," he said. Defeated, Lisa signed the papers and handed them back. "Have a good day," the server said as he accepted them. She looked at John with tears in her eyes, but he simply looked away. The deputies escorted her out and took her to the van that would transport her to the state women's prison. The trials against Rick and his crew took much longer. Detective Harris found a treasure trove of evidence suggesting they had victimized up to 15 men over the last 18 months. They found what appeared to be releases signed by the husbands, but the men they tracked down said the releases were signed after the fact and under duress. Making matters worse, the site owners had also posted personal information about the men they targeted. At least 3 of the victims had committed suicide as a result of what was done to them. By the time it was all said and done, all the men involved were sentenced to 25 years of hard labor. The site was torn down, and all the victims, or at least all the men Jenny's team of attorneys could locate, received a huge sum of money, which bankrupted Rick and his associates. The hosting providers settled with the men, adding to the compensation. John nearly broke down crying when Jenny presented him with a $2 million check. While he appreciated the restitution, the money did very little to soothe his broken heart. "You're a good man, John Miller," she told him. "There are lots of good women out there who would love to be with you. You'll find her." "Thanks, Jenny. Maybe one day." John continued seeing his therapist, who helped him deal with his issues. Over the next 2 years, he buried himself in his work and dated periodically, but it had only been in the last couple of months that he dated the same woman more than once. "He's got a lot of issues to deal with," his therapist wrote as she transcribed her notes. "But on the upside, he hasn't had any more episodes and seems to be moving forward. I think he'll do just fine in the long run, at least I hope so," Rhonda thought. A few days later, John met a man at a local bar. The discussion took no more than 10 minutes. John walked out to his car and waited. The man walked near him and picked up the small briefcase that John had already placed on the ground. Both men looked at each other and walked away with a nod. 5 days later, John learned from Jenny that Lisa had gotten pregnant from her actions on that fateful night, but had suffered a miscarriage when 3 large women attacked her in the bathroom. She was bleeding heavily and was in the hospital. Jenny also said that Lisa would never be able to conceive again. People like her should never breed, John thought to himself. 7 days later, Rick and Matt were killed when a huge riot broke out in the prison during lunch hours. 2 days later, Steve was found hanging in his cell. 3 days later, Jake was trying to climb the prison wall with 2 other inmates when he was shot and killed by the prison guards. The other 2 prisoners somehow were unharmed. Bull and 2 others died under mysterious circumstances. According to the autopsy, they were poisoned. Steve was the luckiest of them all. At least, that is what he thought. When he escaped the prison with 2 other inmates and crossed the American border to Mexico, he thought he was free. What he did not know was that he never really escaped. His partners in crime took him straight to Baja. He was eating at a local diner when he met a beautiful woman. They danced together and she offered to take him to her home. Steve was grinning ear to ear when she led him to her bedroom. It was dark, and suddenly, he was hit on the head, and everything went black. A few moments later, Steve opened his eyes and found himself tied to a chair. A man walked up to him and held a phone in front of him. "Hello, Steve? Hope you remember me. My friend has treated you well. I asked my friend to be gentle with you and stretch the night as far as possible, just like you once told me. I promise you'll love it." Steve tried to scream, but his mouth was gagged. A few moments later, he heard the roaring sound of a chainsaw. A man dressed in a yellow raincoat and a gas mask stood before him. The man took the chainsaw and walked closer, asking, "Do you like stew? Thanks for joining us for this intense tale of betrayal and revenge. Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more shocking stories. See you next time.